Hello. Guess who did? Alice! Me. Out to what's the bloody word I'm looking for? I can listen to 3 episodes. 3. How very exciting. Honestly, I am very excited. I know it sounds like I'm taking the piss, but I'm genuinely not. This is incredibly exciting for me. I, for some reason, still can't see my own face on the thing, which is really annoying. And I'm hoping that this does not mean that it's super laggy the whole time, because that would suck. But I've done everything I can. I've updated my laptop. I've updated everything. So honestly, I don't really know why I can't see my own face on the thing. It doesn't make sense to me because, well, I assumed I would still be able to see my own face, but apparently I am not allowed to do that. So that's fine. That's totally fine, you know. Totally fine. Yeah. For sure, for sure. But I do get, yeah, it's just stupid as hell and very annoying, but it's fine. It's totally fine. I don't need to see my own face. I'm not that arrogant. I say that I can see my own face because I've put up something different that also shows face. So I can only hope that the frame rate is decent. It probably isn't, but that's fine. Anyway, I have a lasagna that is cooking because I have not eaten. And whilst we do that, we're gonna... I'm so excited. This is so stupid how excited I am, but I'm honestly fucking chuffed, bro. I've been waiting for this shit. I got my little book. I got my pen because obviously, why the fuck would I have a book without a pen? I got no Coke. That is actually incredibly unfortunate. I can wait. But what I do have is my my lucky stars, which means I can make stars whilst we do this shit. Last time, we may or may not have heard Michael for the first fucking time. Terrifying. He had such a weird voice and I really liked it. But it was very unsettling. But that's fine. You know, that's fine. I'm not going to sit here and, you know, get mad about it. I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, I don't like your voice, because half the time I don't like my own bloody voice. So it's fine, honestly. Sorry, I'm fucking around with the format. I'm being stupid. Anyway, so that's what happened last time. We had Michael for the first time, which was bloody terrifying. And now we are going to listen to the next episode, and I'm nervous because no one seems to have figured out that Sasha isn't Sasha, and I feel kind of offended for her because how has no one realized? I feel like the people around her should have realized, right? Like they know each other well enough, surely. I don't know. Anyway, it's fine. It's totally fine. I'm going to put myself away so that hopefully I actually look at the camera more, because if I'm not getting distracted by my own visual, then maybe we got a chance. Before we let's get this fucking show on the road, bro. Okay.
AI might be the most a mile below. Will his murderous Rusty Quill presents the Magnus Archives.
Hopefully you can hear that nicely because I am wearing my headphones today.
Episode 48. Lost in the Crowd.
Same, honestly. I get lost very easily. Mysterious violin sounds. It's so loud. It does not need to be that loud. I still stand by that.
Statement of Andrea Nunes regarding a series of encounters in the streets of Genoa, Italy.
Okay.
Original statement given 25th March 2010. Audio recording by Jonathan Sims, head archivist of the Magnus Institute.
Head fucking archivist.
Statement
you
begins.
Forget it.
Travel has always been my passion.
Okay.
I remember as a kid, my parents used to take us on trips to this small cabin in Wales.
All right.
I was very young at the time, maybe 4 or 5, and the cabin wasn't anything special, just cheap self-catering.
Okay.
It was all the holiday that my parents could afford, and I had to share a bunk bed with my brat of an older brother. I remember that every time we drove across that huge bridge from England into Wales, I got this rush of discovery, of exploration.
To Wales?
Seeing new places, going further, travelling.
I've never had such a response to Wales, but...
As I said, my parents didn't have much money, so the first chance I really had to go beyond the UK was when I took a gap year. I'd saved for years to afford that trip, helped by an inheritance from a distant grandmother, and I bought a bunch of Interrail train tickets and spent almost 4 months rolling across Europe, never staying more than a few days in any one place and heading on as soon as I got bored. There were nights that I was unable to find a hostel and ended up having to sleep on the streets, and I even slept in a graveyard once. I'd pick up travelling companions for a few days here and there, but for the most part I would spend weeks without speaking my own language. I had adventures and saw wonders and got into more than a bit of trouble on occasion. It was the happiest I'd ever been. Since then, travel has always been my main joy in life. I got out of university with a good maths degree and got a job as a programmer.
Okay.
It's a life of well-paid drudgery, but I don't care. Because it means once or twice a year I can drop everything for a month and disappear somewhere new. The Grand Canyon, the Forbidden City, the Great Barrier Reef.
Oh, I've been to the Grand Canyon. It's kind of sick, I can't lie.
Everything in between is just the intermission. I suppose that's one of the reasons I've always had such trouble with romance or even close friendships. I can never take them seriously because they aren't a part of my real life. And in my real life, I travel alone.
Ah, you're a lone wolf,
I know it's a lot more dangerous, and people always tell me how lonely it must be, but it really isn't. There's a purity to being alone when you travel.
Yeah,
you
I can see that.
The places you find yourself in so much better, take in the sights and the smells and the vibrations of a place in a way you just can't if you have to be mindful of another person's presence.
No, that's fair enough.
It isn't that I don't like other people, I do. I just can't travel properly if I'm with them. For my 25th birthday last year, I decided to treat myself to another go at Europe. Obviously, I couldn't do another 4 months, but I figured that just the one would let me revisit my favourite spots in the south. Slovenia, Switzerland, Bavaria, Italy, maybe Monaco or bits of southern France.
Oh, fun.
I'm lucky, and views of San Marino.
You've actually never been to Italy.
I avoided going to Naples, which was a horrible place. These rude people. Instead began travelling north again via Florence. It was in a Florence hostel that I met Ethan Taylor.
Ooh, hello, Ethan
was
Taylor.
Every inch the Australian traveller. Tall and tan, with slightly curly, dirty blonde hair and a carefree attitude.
Oh.
I've met literally hundreds just like him in every hostel across the globe. For some reason, I really hit it off with Ethan in a way I hadn't with any of the others of his kind. I think it's because when he talked about travelling, he talked about it the same way I did. He wasn't going around for fun or because that's what every Australian does when they reach that age. He travelled because he had to. And like me, he said, he always travelled alone.
Kindred
We spent a few
spirits.
nights together in the hostel, much to the irritation of the other guests. But as much as I enjoyed his company, I didn't have any interest in travelling with him for long, and it seemed he felt the same way. It was with a sort of mutual, unspoken discomfort that we found ourselves ending up on the same train heading north.
Oh.
It seemed like it would have been rude not to at least acknowledge each other, so we sat in the same compartment and stared out the window. It was all right, actually. Each lost in our thoughts as the Italian countryside rolled past. We'd been traveling when Ethan looked like considered visiting, and Ethan began to tell me about it. He'd been there a few years before, he said. The coastline was beautiful.
Ooh.
All clear blue ocean and narrow winding lanes.
Ooh.
I didn't have any other plans, so I said, sure. And you know what? He was right. It was beautiful. The colourful houses climbing up the steep streets from the coast and the paths beside the sea. The first day we stepped off the train, I fell a little bit in love with Genoa. We checked into a hostel and, for once, decided to get a private room. We dropped our backpacks from tired shoulders. We didn't need to say anything to know we'd be exploring the city on our own. Ethan would be revisiting cherished memories, and I would be discovering new ones. But neither of us wanted to do so in company.
That's fair.
Most of our time together was spent at night, dining, talking, or otherwise engaged. The first morning, I went for a walk along the coast.
I really like how, for some reason, despite this not being a children's show, they're still not allowed to like swear or say that like we fucked. We were otherwise engaged. Just say you fucked, bro. Just why are you embarrassed? Why are you shy? Go on, we're all friends here, it's fine.
The air was invigorating, and when the salt-tinged air sent cool fingers running through my hair, I felt so alive I nearly wept.
That's quite...
I put all thoughts of returning to my dull English life from my mind and relished my freedom.
That's quite nice.
There were a few others walking near me, but Italian is one of the few languages I have never managed to pick up even a small amount of, so their conversation was alien to me and did not intrude on my precious isolation.
Mm.
As Ethan and I talked that night, I tried to put it into words, but without any real success. Even here, with the time to compose it properly, I'm still not sure I've caught the essence of what I felt. Ethan, for his part, had told me of his explorations of the back streets of Genoa. He had found himself in a small section of town that seemed older than the rest, he said, and unlike the rest of it, it was bustling. He suspected there might have been an out-of-the-way street market there and was hoping to find it again tomorrow. Then we went to bed, and I got what may have been my last restful night.
Ever?
The next day I decided to find a nice local cafe and spend some time
ever, or
reading.
just there?
It wasn't difficult to do, as if there's one thing it's easy to find in Italy, it's coffee.
Yeah.
This one was well hidden and warmer than outside, even though the day was very hot for the time of year.
Mm-hmm.
I took a seat and ordered a coffee. I tried to read, but it was so warm that even with the strong coffee in my hand, I found it hard to keep my eyes open and kept nodding off. It was after one such accidental nap that I saw him. He was pale, scrawny almost, and looked utterly out of place.
Oh, God.
His loose, bright shirt was in stark contrast to his long, black hair. He was staring at me in a way I found quite uncomfortable. I mean, I know I'm not unattractive, and I'm used to creepy guys staring at me sometimes, but this was different. He was staring at me with an air of concentration, like he was trying to read something written very small on my forehead. After about a minute of this, he got up and walked over to me. He took the seat opposite and sat down. He was still staring at me, and it became clear that I was going to have to start the conversation. So I asked him who the hell he was and what the hell he wanted. He ignored the first question completely and said, in English, that what he wanted was to have a nice holiday in peace. He said it in a really accusatory way, like I was ruining his holiday somehow, and I said so. He sighed and said that he wasn't in the business of helping strays. Now, I didn't know what help he was offering, and I certainly didn't ask for it, so I got up to leave. He apologized grudgingly and said that, as he was here, he felt he should at least let me know that I was marked. He didn't know what by, but that it was close. Was I married? Did I have a fiancé, partner, friends? I told him no, not really. I was just about sick of his stupid questions, but he sounded oddly desperate. Siblings? No. Mother? Of course I had a mother. Were we close? Did I love her? I gave him a look, and he again asked if we were close. I said yes, we were very close, and then I got up to leave. As I left, I heard him call after me, telling me to remember my mother, to keep her face in my mind. I didn't reply.
That's Gerard.
Ethan didn't return to the hostel that night.
It sounds like Gerard.
At first I assumed he was simply out drinking late, but as evening turned into night and night turned into morning, I started to get a little worried. It was none of my business, of course, but Genoa wasn't an all-night party sort of town. I would have assumed he'd maybe just headed on without me, but his backpack was still in our room, untouched. I wanted to dismiss it as paranoia, but my encounter with the weirdo in the cafe had left me a bit rattled.
I bet if
When the sun came up on the third day in Genoa without any sign of Ethan, I decided to go out and look for him.
Sure, you report.
My first move was to try and locate that street market he'd mentioned. Perhaps it wasn't just hidden away. Perhaps it had been actually illegal and he'd got caught up in something he shouldn't have.
Oh, shit, I hadn't actually
He'd given
thought
me a
that.
good idea of the rough area in Genoa it had been, so I started my search there. I found nothing. Asking around just yielded a barrage of confused Italian from passers-by who I couldn't talk to. So I just kept walking. Morning turned into afternoon, and the previously sunny day became overcast and oppressive. I would occasionally half-heartedly shout out Ethan's name, though I don't know what I was expecting. At first, this got me annoyed shouts from nearby windows, then glares, and eventually they got no response at all. The streets I was walking were narrower and narrower.
Oh, God.
And the houses and buildings next to me seemed to get taller with each turning I made, their previously vibrant colours muted under the cloudy sky. The afternoon was completely silent. I began to think, how long had it been since I saw another person?
Oh, God.
20 minutes, an hour, 2 hours? I hadn't checked my watch and my mind was foggy. It was hard to think in all the humidity. I went to take a drink from my water bottle to find it empty. Had I finished it? I couldn't have been searching that long. Then I heard it from up ahead, the dull murmuring of a crowd of people, that rolling babble of incomprehensible noise that only comes from dozens of voices talking at once. Relief washed over me and I headed towards the noise. The street I was heading towards was wider than those that I had just been walking and seemed better lit somehow. All I could see a constant flow of people travelling down it in both directions. Perhaps this was the market Ethan mentioned. I stumbled out into it and began to look around. I couldn't see any stalls or shops or anything that might explain the presence of so many people, but I didn't have time to really think about it before they started bumping into me.
It's like Spirited Away.
It didn't seem deliberate, but there were so many people, far more than I had thought at first, and they couldn't move without jostling or pushing me. The flow of people dragged me this way and that. I was surrounded by that noise, that mumbling noise of the crowd. Now I was inside it, though, I realized it wasn't Italian being spoken, or English, or any other language I recognized. The more I listened, the more I realized it wasn't a language. There were no words, it was just noise. Just a noise being made by the people around me.
And
I started to focus on them. And that's when I began to scream. Their faces were a blur. Each and every one of them. It was like someone had recorded them screaming or having a seizure and then played it back at 100 times the speed on their face.
Oh.
None of them had hair or any distinguishing marks, and though their clothes were different, they were all different versions of the same clothes. I tried to talk to them or to shout, to scream at them, but there was no reaction.
Oh, that's crazy.
I tried to push, to punch or kick them, but they were pressed in too tight and I couldn't do anything except get buffeted this way and that by them. This crowd of people, they weren't people. It was just a crowd.
That's so
A
weird.
crowd without any people in it, and I was still completely alone. was then, as I felt my grip begin to slide, and I worried that I would lose myself to the crowd forever, that the words of that strange man in the coffee shop came to my mind.
Big up, Gerard.
Think of your mother. And I did. I thought of her face, the smell of her perfume, the long rambling phone calls made whenever we got the chance. I closed my eyes and remembered in as much detail and with as much love as I could muster in my despair. I didn't notice when the bodies around me stopped pushing, or when the droning sound of the crowd stopped. Eventually I opened my eyes again. It was night, and I was on a street I didn't recognize, with an old Italian couple staring at me like I had gone mad. It took me another hour to find my way back to the hostel, and I made sure I was always in sight of at least one other person. I didn't search for Ethan any further. I had as much of an answer as I was going to get and left his backpack in the hostel, in case he ever made it back to collect. I doubt he did.
What?
I cut my travels short after that, came back home by as direct a route as I could, and spent some time at my mother's house.
Hang on.
I've been traveling since, but...
Hang the fuck on. Okay. Listen, I get it, right? Lone wolf shit. Okay. Respectfully, you haven't seen an individual that you are sharing a room with for, like, what, 4 fucking days? Tell the police! So they can fucking do some shit about it. Are you joking? Maybe he'll go back and get his bag. Bitch! Are you mentally deficient? What the fuck are you doing? What you could do is you could just go to the police and say, look, I was sharing a hostel with this guy. I don't really know him. And, you know, he may have moved on to somewhere else and just happened to have left his backpack. But like I said, he left his backpack in his hostel room. I haven't seen him in 4 days. So, you know, just to make sure he ain't fucking dead, this is his name. Maybe try and give him a fucking call or something, just so that, I mean, I don't care, because again, I don't know him, but, you know, it's probably a good idea that someone knows if he's alive or not. Otherwise, that's a little bit bad. You don't just fucking go home. Raw, mate. I feel kind of bad for the Australian.
But I have some time off coming up and would like to head out again.
Okay.
I might see if I can find a friend to go with me, though. I think it might be a while before I'm ready to travel on my own again.
Yeah.
Statement ends.
You're afraid.
An interesting encounter, though difficult to follow up given its location. Sasha arranged a supplementary interview with Ms. Nunes, who reports she has recently started traveling alone again and has not had any further problems.
Okay.
Martin has confirmed that over the last decade, there have been several travelers reported missing in Genoa, but averaged out no more than is normal for a city of its size. I don't quite know whether this means that few travelers go missing in Genoa, or that a lot of travelers go missing everywhere else. I'm curious about this coffee shop stranger Ms. Nunes met. His description puts me in mind of Jared Key, though there isn't much to it. If it is him,
Jared.
then he must have taken this trip shortly after he was acquitted of his mother's murder. Fleeing the country for a while, perhaps? Maybe there were rumors of a Leitner in Genoa. Maybe he was genuinely on holiday. No way to tell without more detail. I am sure of the accuracy of this statement in one area, however. Tim managed to get in contact with the Menena hostel in Genoa, and they confirmed that just over 6 years ago, they had a backpack logged in the lost and found under the name E. Taylor. It was never claimed. End recording.
Give me that crazed supplement. Supplemental.
My is at last.
I'm sorry, I'll never get over his shift from I'm totally fine. I have all of my mental assets. I'm doing great too. Right. Listen, I don't have much time. The shift is so apparent. And so either he's really good at faking that he's okay, or he's kind of putting it on just to really emphasize that like shit's going down. I don't know. But either way, I love you, John, and you are my favorite thing right now.
Tweet has been playing on my mind. What struggle is he talking about? And if there is one, what's his stake in it? What even is he?
Struggle?
Listening back over his visit, I am also struck by something that in the confusion of his arrival completely passed me by the first time. His words were a warning that I cannot trust Sasha, that she was lying about something. Of course, it is becoming rapidly apparent in my investigation that I can trust nobody. But of all of them, Sasha seemed the least suspicious. I can't find any evidence she ever even met Gertrude. Her working here seems the natural progression of a lifelong interest in the paranormal. She's been doing her work with the same diligence as before the Prentice incident, and indeed of all of them seems to have been the least affected. That said, she did lose the tape documenting her experience. Or is she lying about her meeting with Michael, leaving things out? Or is Michael simply messing with my head, as indeed seemed to be the entire purpose of his visit? On another note, I need to be subtler in my inquiries. Here follows a recording I managed to make of a short meeting Elias requested.
I don't enjoy having to have these meetings, John. You know I don't.
Well, I'm sorry you're compelled to. I assume you've had another complaint?
Yes.
Who from this time? Was Dr. Elliot offended I declined to take his apple? Was I too rude to Michael?
Who's Michael? No, it's from your team.
What?
Martin and Tim have both approached me. Apparently, you've been spying on them.
Spying on them? Of course not. No, it's just I've been worried about their mental health following Prentice's attack, so I've been keeping a closer eye on them than usual.
Tim says you were watching his house.
Well, that's just not true.
Well, what matters is your team thinks that it could be.
Gaslight Gatekeep Girl Boss John is back! That is obviously not true. Preach your truth, John. Preach your truth. Even if it's a fucking lie. Beautiful.
I know finding Gertrude's body hit you hard. I understand, but you need to leave this alone. It isn't their mental health that's under scrutiny right now.
Fine. Is that all?
Yes.
I need to be more careful about the others noticing my investigations, especially if I have further cause to watch their homes. More importantly, though, I think Elias just moved to the top of my suspect list. I wonder what he's hiding. In supplement.
John is actually the funniest fucker I've ever met. I like that he completely... Okay. I hate to be that bitch, but how do you completely disregard the fact that a strange, distorted entity refers to your co-worker as it? Not she, it. How do you just brush over that? He was like, what did Michael, like, maybe, did Michael mean that she was lying about the, like, no, she's lying about being a she. She's an it. She's a not person. She's not fucking Sasha. Get your head out of your ass, Jonathan. You're so mentally deranged right now that you can't tell the fucking leaves from the trees, bro. I like to imagine, I keep seeing fan art of him with grey hairs, and I really do think that that's accurate. I do think that man got so stressed that he stopped producing color in his hair. I think that is absolutely accurate. And I just don't get how no one has figured out that Sasha is not Sasha. Like, does she look exactly the same? Because from the description from the not whatever his name was, from that episode with the hooks that freaked me out. Like, they come out with the uncanny version does not look like them really at all. Like, they get all the details wrong. So, and like, her voice sounds different. You can hear it. Her fucking voice sounds different. How can you not realize that she is not Sasha? How did it take a distorted fucking spider arm fingered bitch showing up and creating an extra door in your fucking archive for you to even consider the fact that something's not right with Sasha? Like, I'm sorry, but John, you need to take a fucking nap because it's getting out of hand. This is getting out of hand, my friend. No, I'm worried about their mental health. They found you spying at their houses. And then John going, what the... That's not true. You tell him, babe. Tell him, babe. Jonathan is literally, I've never done anything wrong in my life ever. And Martin is that I know this and I love you. If you know that reference, I good job. I mean, to be honest, I haven't even watched it, the show that it's from, the whole way through, so I don't have a leg to stand on. I have a feeling that the next one is to do with meat of the humankind. My reasoning, yeah, well, you see, it's called The Butcher's Window. Okay.
A mile will his murder. Rusty Quill, episode 49. The Butcher's Window.
Jeez, you said it so dramatically that time. 49. Okay. John's mental health has somehow derailed into his actual actor. Brilliant. How was Elias not at the top of your fucking thing in the first place? I keep trying to not think about the thing I saw. I'm not thinking about it.
Statement of Gregory Pryor regarding his investigations into one Hector Laredo during the summer of 2007. Original statement given March the 11th, 2008. Audio recording by Jonathan Sims, head archivist of the Magnus Institute, London.
He sounds so tired.
Begins.
He sounds really tired.
You don't mind me drinking in here, do you? No, of course you don't. Bet half the guys roll in here are leaking scotch all over your precious paperwork. I'm sober enough to write it down, for now at least. And that's all that matters to you, isn't it? I'm a private investigator. Used to be police, but not anymore. None of your business why. You can draw your own conclusions if you want, but it's not something I care to talk about.
Okay, Jesus, why are you so defensive, bro?
Last June, I got a job from one Nicola Laredo. She was the wife of a lowlife by the name of Hector Laredo and was keen to change that to ex-wife. Except that there was some kind of prenup in the mix and she was looking to catch him cheating, which is where I came in.
I see.
Standard stuff, pretty boring really, but it keeps the wolf from the door.
What the fuck?
My first investigation.
What the fuck does that... It keeps the wolf from the door? It keeps the wolf from the door. If you keep the wolf from the door, you succeed in providing food and other necessary things for yourself and your family. I don't understand how those two... That is peculiar. Peculiar. Also, I got some little scabs on my lips because I put on some fake snake bites just to see how they'd look, and I cut myself up by accident. Anyway, Gregory is a right defensive bastard, so he's definitely done some sketchy shit in his time. I don't know what, but he's done something. Anyway, Gregory, tell me more.
Didn't turn up much. Checking Hector online was pointless. If he owned a computer, it wasn't for hooking up or making friends.
Okay.
Impersonating him to the phone company was also a waste of time. Only numbers he called regularly were his brother, his wife, and the Chinese takeaway at the end of his road. Lazy ass. I reckoned he had a second mobile, but couldn't find any obvious paper trail for it.
Take it back,
So I
Gregory's
decided to
judgmental
take
as
my
fuck.
investigation to the next stage. I began to tail him. Hector was exactly the kind of guy I always end up following. Heading into middle age with nothing to show for it but half a head of hair and a beer belly straining against work shirts,
Hey,
and always have some kind of food or sweat stain.
you're drinking whilst giving a statement, mate. You're not
loser.
much better off. Fuck off,
I
yeah.
know I'm not one to talk.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
I was sympathizing with the wife, not just because she was the one paying me. Hector worked IT for some shipping and delivery company with its admin centre down in Liverpool Street. I say he worked there, but that could easily be a lie. Even though I wasn't able to get past the front desk, the sheer number of smoke breaks Hector took out front cast some serious doubts on whether he was doing his job at all. According to wife Nicola, Hector had recently had a sudden series of working late nights, and based on what I was seeing of him at the day job, she was right on the money with her suspicions. There was no way this guy was staying a minute past closing. Sure enough, hanging around his office, I saw him shuffling out the building shortly after 6. I started shadowing him carefully, although after a few minutes it became clear that I really didn't need to be cautious as all that. The man was completely oblivious to anything that wasn't inside his own head or in front of his face, and after a while I found I could walk literally 15 feet behind him the whole way, and he had no idea. I knew I was in luck when I saw him head into the underground. His route home should have taken him down the central line, but instead he headed onto the Hammersmith and City, riding east. Whatever, or whoever, his illicit liaisons involved, I was pretty sure that me and my camera were following him right to it. He got off the train at Barking, which was promising. It was exactly the sort of place I would have expected the lover of someone like Hector to live. Residential, depressing and cheap. For London, at least. It was almost 7 o'clock by this point, and it was late June, so there was still a while before nightfall, and I got more careful about my pursuit. There were less people here, so blending into a crowd was no longer an option, and I made sure to keep a bit more distance as he walked down streets of terraced houses. We'd been walking for about 20 minutes when I began to realise that he wasn't going into any of the houses. Instead, he made his way south until he reached the A13. He made his way over the motorway, now choked with commuter traffic, and headed down into what looked like a warehouse or industrial estate on River Road. I was becoming less and less convinced that this was a simple screwing around job, which made me uneasy, but it was still a long way from scaring me
You used
off.
to work for the police.
Besides,
How is that
I was
making you
curious.
uneasy, mate?
So I followed Hector over the A13 and down River Road.
Okay.
I was going very slowly now, as I was the only one walking down that road except for Hector. And if he turned around, well, idiot that he was, I don't think even he could have failed to spot me. So I stayed close to the buildings and ducked behind them whenever I could. I'll be the first to admit I'm not as fit as I was back when I was on the force, but I was still quick enough to keep up with Hector's slow, meandering pace. After another 5 minutes, he reached a warehouse with a for sale sign on it. There was nothing else notable or distinctive about the place, and the sign looked like it had been up for years. I spotted a small hole in the decaying concrete wall that divided it from the adjacent lot and made for it. Through the hole I watched as Hector stopped and, for the first time, looked behind him. When he saw nobody and nodded like he was congratulating himself on a job well done, I almost laughed so hard I gave myself away. Hector checked his watch, clearly waiting for someone, and put down his briefcase. It was only then I realised how odd it was that an IT tech would carry an old-fashioned leather briefcase to work. Still, I didn't have much time to wonder about it before a red SUV pulled up and 2 white guys in tracksuits got out and started heading towards Hector. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but I was snapping pictures anyway. I had a pretty good idea as to what was going on, and I was not at all surprised when they handed Hector a brown envelope obviously full of money. In return, he opened the briefcase to show a tight white brick before snapping it closed again and handing it over. I took plenty more pictures before slipping away unnoticed. Drugs complicated matters, but not necessarily in a bad way. Theoretically, pictures of the crime could get Nicola out of her doomed marriage just as quick as any sleazy snapshots. And if I played my cards right, I could even make a good bonus out of him myself in the form of some hush money. Blackmail's an ugly word, but it does pay the bills. and given how bad Hector was at spotting me, it was only a matter of time before he was behind bars. So I might as well get some use out of that sweet drug money before it was taken by the courts. I mean, he took the briefcase to work, for God's sake. The trick was going to be making sure that Hector wasn't connected in a way that would make this difficult. From what I could see, he was pretty low rung and expendable enough that a bit of blackmail wouldn't piss off any of the bigger fish trafficking what looked to be heroin. Still, drug dealers and their bosses can be unpredictable, so I decided to keep watching the poor slob for a while to make sure I wasn't going to be stepping on the wrong toes. So for the next week, I watched Hector all day, every day, and I can confidently say that he was the worst drug mule I've ever come across. I knew some real screw-ups back in my police days, but nothing that even came close to Hector Laredo. I genuinely had no idea how he ended up working for these guys, who I eventually pegged as Ukrainian mafia.
Oh.
I suppose he did look like the last person you'd suspect of running drugs, but that was the only thing he had going for him. In addition to being unbelievably oblivious, he was also sloppy and forgetful. I once watched him leave the suitcase, drugs and all, on his front porch for 3 hours in broad daylight before he remembered and came back for it. Ironically, I didn't actually see him lose the drugs. I needed to use the bathroom in a coffee shop I'd followed him to, and when I got out, he'd moved on. Sometime in the 2 hours it took me to find him again, he'd managed to put the suitcase down and forget it. It was gone. I saw realization cross his face as he began to panic. This was bad news for both of us. Worse for him, of course, but it did mean that I wouldn't be making my bonus. I followed him a while longer out of morbid curiosity and watched as he tried to explain himself to the Ukrainians. I expected anger, a beating, maybe even a murder right then and there. But instead they just exchanged a look, mumbled a few words to Hector, and handed him a small slip of paper. Then they drove away. Hector looked at the paper, typed something into his phone and threw it away as he walked off. It was an address in Stockwell and an instruction. Ask for Jared. I didn't follow him that time. I was pretty sure they'd just handed the poor idiot a death sentence. When Nicola called the next day to say Hector hadn't come home, I was sure. At this point I came clean to her about her husband's activities, although I did lie about the timings to make it seem like I'd only just discovered about the drugs. No need for her to know why I'd kept it to myself. When I told her about the loss and the note, she sat down, clearly trying to process everything. She didn't seem particularly broken up over the fact that her husband was most likely dead, something that was quickly confirmed as she started moving on to talking about savings and life insurance. That's when I should have taken my payment and gone. If I hadn't gotten greedy, I'd still have my arm. So I was all set to leave when Nicola asked me how long I thought it was going to be before they found a body.
Damn. Just came out with that, did you? Fucking hell. Okay.
Stupidly, I said that if the Ukrainians were any good, there probably wouldn't be a body to find. At this, Nicola seemed to panic slightly, asking a lot of questions about missing persons and being declared legally dead without a body, which is a long, drawn-out headache. She clearly didn't want to wait and asked me to try and find some evidence that Hector was dead. I said no, of course. Then she named a price that, well, let's just say Hector Laredo's life insurance policy must have been a hell of a thing. Even at the time, I knew I was making the wrong decision, but that much money? I said yes. So the next day I found myself in Stockwell.
And now you don't have an arm, apparently.
Staring at a butcher's shop. No name was written over the front, but the display of chilled carcasses and slabs of meat in the window made it perfectly clear what it was. I started to wonder if the Ukrainian mafia was involved in some full-on Sweeney Todd body disposal, but quickly reminded myself that even if, and it was a big if, they were killing and disposing of bodies there, it didn't mean they were selling the meat to the public. That would be a massive and unnecessary risk, and organised crime wasn't big on unnecessary risk. It was a sunny day, and the smell of the hot tarmac mixed with the odour of raw meat that drifted from the door.
Ew.
It had a closed sign, displayed prominently despite the time of morning, and there were no interior lights on. I couldn't see anything inside except the old, poorly refrigerated meat hanging in the window, dripping silently onto the trays below. I reminded myself how much money was on the line and tried the handle. To my surprise, it was unlocked.
That's never a good
the shadowed
thing.
storefront before anyone spotted me.
That's never, oh, what my luck. That's a they
But
want
not
you
as
to
strong
come
as I
in.
had
You're
expected.
fucked.
A quick glance around the place told me why. Aside from the window display, the room was devoid of meat. In fact, there didn't seem to be much there at all, aside from a refrigerated counter and drinks cooler. Both sat empty. I waited and listened, prepared to bolt through the door at the slightest sound, but it was quiet. I gathered myself and made my way around the counter to open the door into the back. I was keeping an eye out for anything that might have given a hint as to Hector's fate. As soon as I had proof, I was gone.
Mm-hmm.
The door to the back opened with a puff of air, like there was a change of pressure, and I noticed how thick the steel door was. Even the glass porthole at the top seemed a few inches. It was only later I realized it must have been soundproofed. The room behind it was lit by several bright fluorescent bulbs on the ceiling and walls and, much as I suspected, looked closer to a morgue or an operating theatre than a butcher's shop, despite the well-kept and razor-sharp tools hanging on a nearby rack. There were several large lockers along one wall, a steel chair in the corner, and, though there were no stainless steel drawers, the tarpaulin-covered shape that lay awkwardly on the central table was disconcertingly familiar. I took a breath and pulled back the plastic sheet. Hector Laredo lay there on the table. He was naked, utterly still, and though he seemed to be in one piece, his skin had the sickly pallor of a corpse. I sighed, relieved at this discovery which, from my perspective, was about the best result I could have hoped for. I spent a minute or two taking pictures for Nicola and headed back towards the door. And that's when everything started to go horribly wrong.
That's where it
When
went
I
wrong.
reached the doorway back into the shop front, I took a second to glance through the window and I froze.
Oh, God.
In the entrance to the shop stood a huge, hulking silhouette. It reached to push it open, and I staggered back into the room looking for another way out. There was only one other door, apparently into the rest of the building, but it was firmly locked and I didn't have time to try and get through. Without any other options, I covered Hector back over with the tarpaulin, opened one of the lockers, and squeezed myself inside.
Oh, God.
Luckily for me, they were large and didn't seem to have any shelves. I stepped on something soft and, looking down, saw a rough pile of clothes at my feet. I didn't have time to consider this before I saw the door begin to open. I had to shut myself in. I stood there in the dark, trying not to make a sound, as I heard heavy footfalls approach, and the door to the room slammed shut. From my position, I could just about see out through the vents in the locker, and I very much hoped the huge guy now strapping on an apron could not see in. He was immense, almost 7 feet tall, with thick limbs that looked like they'd been badly carved out of lumpy rock. Even his head was massive, but there, like everywhere, his skin was on show. It bulged slightly when he moved, hard bumps forming and stretching his skin in odd places.
You mean muscle?
Jared mentioned in the note. He pulled back the tarpaulin covering Hector's body and cracked his knuckles. I don't think I'll ever forget the sound of him doing that. Then he reached into Hector. No cutting, no saws, he just reached in. And I realized why the room was soundproofed. Because it turned out Hector wasn't dead. And it was going to be a while before Jared got around to his lungs or throat. Jared pulled out what appeared to be a handful of ribs. He considered them for a few moments before he began to twist them like warm putty, making them into some sort of braid. He considered his handiwork silently as Hector lay screaming on the table, before he shook his head and walked towards my locker. For a terrible moment, I was sure he was going to wrench open the locker and pull me out, but instead, he grabbed a crowbar that had been resting against the wall and levered up one of the metal floor tiles. From where I was standing, I could see there was a hole underneath that seemed to disappear deep into the ground. There was something not right about that hole. The texture of the walls was too smooth to be earth, and it seemed to glisten wetly. It was when I saw the teeth that studded the inside of the fleshy throat that I realized what I was looking at, and I choked back a scream. Jared casually tossed the bones he had been twisting inside, and they disappeared into the dark opening without a sound. And so it went on for 4 grueling hours.
Oh, God!
After the first, Hector wasn't conscious enough to scream anymore, but Jared continued to bend and warp him, occasionally pulling bits out and throwing them into the pit. Once I even saw him take one of Hector's femurs and, after twisting it into a corkscrew spiral, he reached into his own torso and left it there with a sigh of contentment. At last,
What the fuck?
Hector died, and I almost wept with relief. Jared sighed in what sounded like disappointment and then fetched the butcher tools from the wall. It took him another half hour to fully dismember the corpse, tossing each piece into the pit when it was small enough and hosing the blood down into it. He removed his apron, walked to the chair, and sat down. His movements were sluggish now, uncoordinated, almost like he was drunk. Once in the chair, his huge frame slumped forward, and his eyes closed. It looked like he was asleep. I should have waited longer.
Yeah.
I should have made sure he was fast asleep, but I was close to breaking point at this stage, and I could think of nothing but escape. I opened the locker and walked quickly, silently over to the door and opened it. As I did so, the gentle sounds of the street at night filtered through from the shop front. Compared to the grim silence of the butcher's workshop, it was beautiful. At least, it was until an ambulance roared past.
Oh, God.
I heard a roar from behind me and turned to see Jared charging towards me. It was like a strange, lumpy freight train bearing down on me. I tried to close the door, but I was too slow.
Oh, God.
Just before it slammed shut, he grabbed my arm and tried to pull me back. There is no way to describe what it feels like to have bone pulled out of you through your unbroken skin. If you've ever been stabbed or had a decent-sized object embedded in you, maybe you can remember how it felt to have it removed, but even then, the pain is of a different quality. The nerves aren't being torn or cut, they're being pushed aside like water. Imagine the feeling of removing a rubber glove from your hand, but you're the glove, not the hand. And it hurts like the worst...
Oh.
Not the hand. And it hurts like the worst toothache you can imagine. That's as close as I can get to putting it into words. I slammed the door shut and ran into the street, through the people still wandering Stockwell in the evening and away. My now empty left arm hanging limply by my side.
That is an absolutely
I didn't
horrid
stop running
image.
for a very long time.
You've got less weight to
I
carry
guess
now.
in many ways it was a happy ending. The photos, combined with what the police found when they raided the butcher's shop, were enough to declare Hector dead, even without the body. And I got my payday from Nicola Laredo. They never did find Jared, though. He was long gone when they arrived. The doctors amputated the arm in the end, and I'm getting used to the prosthetic. But I can still feel it sometimes, like it's still there. I know it's just phantom limb syndrome, but sometimes I swear it feels like my bones are still out there, twisting in someone else's arm.
Oh!
Statement ends. I don't think it's unreasonable to assume this butcher to be Jared Hopworth. It seems that if Mr. Adekoya's account from statement 999-1006 is accurate, then Hopworth has found new ways to profit from his abilities in the 8 years since his acquisition of the Bone Turner's tale. The book itself is conspicuously absent from this account, though it...
I didn't even make that connection! Oh my God! Oh shit, my lasagna. Sorry. Fuck. There's too much going on. Lasagna. Out of the oven. Brilliant. Food will not burn now. Excellent. That's what we like to see. Well, shit. Goddamn! I did not make that association between the Bone Turner and this. Holy shit! So then, why did Lightning Guy not do this? What the fuck was he feeding? What's the name of the guy again? Jared. There's too many like Jareds, Jared, Gerard, what the fuck ever. There's too many of them, man. Sorry, I'm doing something completely random and stupid. Oh my god, Jared. So Jared had the book to and he took his mum's fucking bones too. And the poor rat that was just like crawling along with its fucking flesh just flailing behind it.
It may simply mean Hopworth no longer needs to keep it with him.
Okay.
No idea about the pit, though. That's new. Its description puts me in mind of some of the more meaty statements, but there isn't enough evidence to make any direct connections.
Ew. Don't like
Mr.
them.
Pryor was unavailable for a follow-up interview as he emigrated to New Zealand in 2013 following a 4-year jail term for tax evasion. He seems to have largely dropped off the map.
Okay.
Nicola Laredo confirmed the basic details of the job she had given to Mr. Pryor, although she was unaware of any of the more gruesome aspects of her husband's murder. At least she was until Martin interviewed her. I should warn Elias to expect another complaint. The police aspect of this statement has been the hardest to follow up. Sasha has recently been having problems with her normal backdoor access to police records as, despite IT's best efforts, her computer has broken yet again, making this the third time in the last 2 months. Until we can source some more reliable equipment, we may have to rely on other methods. Basira has refused to compromise her position any further, so we're having to rely on Tim's involvement with certain staff at the police records office. Apparently he is involved both with one of the young ladies there, as well as the gentleman who manages the other shift. This is useful for acquiring information, but I am uncomfortable with how easily discovered this arrangement might be. The last thing I want is for the archives to become involved in pointless personal drama. Still, he has managed to get copies of the appropriate files. The police did raid the butcher shop following Mr. Pryor's report, but found no one there. It had apparently been abandoned shortly before. They found articles and clothing belonging to roughly 14 people, 5 of whom could be tied to active missing persons cases.
Damn.
They did tear up the floor in the end, but rather than any sort of pit, they found the body of one Harry Goff, the registered owner of the business. He had apparently been dead for 6 months. Jared Hopworth remains at large.
Oh, great.
And recording.
Give me the Cray supplement. Yeah!
Elias Bouchard is a difficult man to pin down, certainly since he became head of the Institute in 1996, taking over from James Wright, who ran the place from 1973 until he passed away. It was a remarkably fast climb to the top, as from what I can find, it looks like he only joined the Institute 5 years before, in 1991, working in the artifact storage. Perhaps he was simply that impressive. Certainly the Elias I know now is almost unmatched in terms of paranormal knowledge. Well, theoretical knowledge at least. And yet, everything I found out about his life before the Institute seems an ill fit with the austere man I know. He apparently graduated with a 3rd from Christchurch College in PPE, and I found an old gossip column in the student newspaper that Sherwell that mentioned him. If I'm not reading too much into it, the implication seems to be that he was something of a pothead. Was he like that when he first came to work here? The difficulty comes from the fact that the only person in the Institute who worked here before he took over was Gertrude.
Oh.
Did he kill her because she knew something about his past? And if so, how can I prove it? End supplemental.
Magnus Archives is a podcast distributed by rustyquill.com and licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike 4.0.
Jesus, that's a long-ass fucking statement. I don't know what the hell he was going to say. I've never listened to it. Lasagna. Oh, I can't wait for my third episode! Ah! I'm salivating, not because of foundations. Interesting.
AI might be the most... Rusty Quill presents the Magnus Archives.
Got I had a hair in my mouth. Let's put these down here.
Episode 50. Foundations.
Why does my body look so weird? Doesn't help that I can do this.
Statement of Samson Kempthorne regarding the workhouse architecture of George Gilbert Scott. Original statement given June 12th, 1841. Audio recording by Jonathan Sims, head archivist of the Magnus Institute.
Head archivist. Don't
Statement
fucking
begins.
forget it.
Dear Jonah, it is my fondest wish that this message should find you in good health, as I have heard more than...
Oh, I love you so much, Jonathan. Is it like the Institute that's making him read them like that? Or is it just his theatrical vibe? Is it just his natural theatrical essence that's making him read these with character? Or is it the Institute being like, this is how they would have said it, and then like forcing him to say it like that through like mind tricks? You know? I don't know.
One mutual acquaintance remark on your current state of overwork. While I earnestly hope it is merely idle gossip, my knowledge of your character leads me to entreat that you allow yourself some respite, or at the very least take some further secretarial staff into your employ. Certain uncharitable quarters would have it that your life consists of little but rattling around an Edinburgh townhouse, surrounded by piles of ghostly accounts and lunatic documentation. Piles, I am afraid to say, to which I am about to make an addition. I would suggest you come visit with myself and Marianne as a diversion, but if you are of a mind to do so, you must travel swiftly. You see, we are shortly to depart for New Zealand, there to start a new life, far from London and its workhouses. And it is this imminent departure that has had such a freeing effect upon my pen. For there are things I have seen which I feel deserve a place among your asylum of letters. They regard the works of my former assistant, George Gilbert Scott, whose own architectural practice is now most respected. I have been fearful that accusations of slander might dog me were my tale to be set down, but with a boat to the New World beckoning and your sterling reputation for discretion, I feel it may at last be time to divest myself of the disquieting scenes I have witnessed. George came to me in 1834 from his engagement with the office of Henry Roberts, where he was completing his training. Henry himself I have the greatest respect for, as he trained under Sir Robert Smirke, who had received his knighthood not 2 years previous. Henry was very effusive about the talents and prospects of young Mr. Scott, and was at great pains to inform me that his young protege had also received certain architectural tutelages from Sir Robert himself. He said this with the oddest of looks, as though there was some jolly secret between us. I rather just nodded, as if to say I took his meaning, and he left well enough alone. He even showed me George's work on drafting his plans for the Fishmonger's Hall near London Bridge, which had opened to great acclaim. It certainly seemed clear to me that he would make a fine assistant, at least for as long as I were able to keep him. And so we began our brief collaboration, the subject of which was the workhouse, a topic, as I'm sure you recall, very close to my heart. The plight of the poor and destitute has been a national disgrace for far too long, and when I was handed the task of designing them by the Poor Law Commissioners, it was an undertaking I embarked on with no small amount of zeal. My original designs were intended to assist in the easy segregation of inmates by sex, age, or infirmity, with capacity and utility foremost in my mind. I know many look on the workhouse with disdain, calling it the pauper's Bastille and seeing very little distinction between the workhouse and the prison. But this is a deeply myopic view to take. The prison keeps its population for the safety and improvement of society at large, while the workhouse exists for the improvement of the inmates themselves. To criticize the conditions as harsh is to overlook the basic moral imperative of work itself, and I firmly believe that to dismiss the punitive as a valid form of moral improvement is to consign many a poor soul to perdition. But I digress, Jonah. I am so used to penning defenses of my designs that it seems I can write little which does not do so. It was in his assistance with these designs that George first began to show those peculiarities of character that I would become so ill at ease with. His process redrafting was deeply unsettling. He would spend hours in the office simply staring at the drawings, saying nothing, taking no food or drink, and ignoring any inquiry or interruption. Then, in a single move, he would gather up all the papers and retire to his private office, locking the door behind him. Then, from the other side of that firm oak door, I would hear the strangest sounds, muttering and shouting. It was always in George's voice alone. I could never quite discern the words. It often sounded as though he were in some great distress, and on more than one occasion I was within minutes of summoning a constable to assist in breaking through the door, when he would emerge, glistening from exertion and holding completely redone drawings. I'm sure I even saw blood on his collar once. The designs themselves were little better. He would take the solid functionality of my original plans and remake them in all sorts of odd symmetries which, while architecturally intriguing, generally sacrificed many practical considerations. He also, without fail, made everything closer. Passageways would be narrowed and sleeping quarters shrunk until a building designed to hold 300 paupers would be remade to house almost twice that number. As I mentioned before, I have no objection to harsh conditions within the workhouse to dissuade the idle from taking residence there. But the cramped plans that George would present me bordered upon the claustrophobic, and I was generally unable to use them. Each time I told him so, his face would tighten in momentary anger and his lips would go white. Then I would watch as he took that rage and discarded it, once again becoming the genial, if somewhat serious, young man I had first met. It was an odd sight. When his father died in 1834, it came as no great surprise to me that he chose to resign from my service. He told me he considered it necessary to become the provider for his family, though I have my suspicions he was also eager to no longer have his designs subject to my scrutiny. I wished him well, naturally, but could not honestly say I was not somewhat relieved by his departure. It was shortly after this I received an invitation to a small social gathering hosted by Henry Roberts. It was there that I met Sir Robert Smirk. He was a tall man, with sharp, almost saturnine features and eyes that seemed to regard you in ratios and pounds of raw material. He was polite and gregarious, but I found him difficult to talk to at length, as he seemed to be forever further ahead in the conversation than I was, and I could never be sure whether or not I was boring him. When I realized that George was not present and there was no sign of his imminent arrival, I resolved to raise the matter with Sir Robert regarding what exactly his tutelage had entailed. The mention of the name George Gilbert Scott, Sir Robert's face flushed suddenly with anger in a manner not entirely unlike that of his protege. He asked me what my interest was in Mr. Scott, and I told him that he had until recently been engaged as my assistant. At this, Sir Robert gave a small laugh of satisfaction and told me I did not realize exactly how lucky an escape I may have had. I asked again what exactly his training had entailed, and Sir Robert stared at me for a silent minute before he finally nodded his head. Balance, he told me. Equilibrium, the hardest thing for an architect to achieve. Symmetry is easy, but does not in and of itself result in balance. To stir the feelings of man, to create a small place of being, divorced from the rest of the world, while still retaining that balance, is the true goal of the architect. I had never heard my profession talked of with such conviction and fire before, and I will not lie to you, Jonah, the look in his eyes when he spoke scared me. Without prompting, his tirade continued, and he began to talk about George, about shortcuts and symmetry, and a patron that the young fool did not understand. I could follow very little of it, and it seemed to be decidedly removed from anything that I would consider architecture, but whatever it was that Sir Robert had been teaching George, it appeared the lessons had been put to less noble use than he had intended. It was at this point that Henry noticed Sir Robert's agitation from across the room and came over to gently usher him away to the smoking room. He sent me a glance of mild reproach as he led his mentor away, and I was left standing there in the middle of the room, utterly confused and rather shaken. I resolved to avoid, where possible, having anything further to do with George, and continued with my own works. I heard he had set himself up with the construction of workhouses according to his own designs. He had taken on a partner by the name of William Bonathan Moffat, a builder's son with no moral character to recommend him of any sort. They vigorously canvassed several district guardians and managed to acquire several commissions that had previously been mine.
Ooh.
Needless to say, I was rather taken aback by this utter lack of professional etiquette. But I was not without other projects, so I endeavoured to ignore it, and leave him to whatever squalid interments he cared to build. It was in September of '36 that it happened, shortly after George and Moffat had finally opened the first of their workhouses. I didn't realise that was what had happened until afterwards, ensconced as I had been in my own work. Darkness had fallen, and still I was busy, lit by the reassuring glow of a dozen candles. There was no clock in the workshop, a deliberate choice to stop the lateness of the hour, but I was not without other projects, so I endeavoured to ignore it, and leave him to whatever squalid interments he cared to build.
Ooh.
It was in September of '36 that it happened, shortly after George and Moffat had finally opened the first of their workhouses. I didn't realise that was what had happened until afterwards, ensconced as I had been in my own work. Darkness had fallen, and still I was busy, lit by the reassuring glow of a dozen candles. There was no clock in the workshop, a deliberate choice to stop the lateness of the hour disturbing me, but I suspected to have been somewhere past midnight when I heard them. Footsteps. Heavy, thudding footsteps, and the click-clack of a sturdy cane.
Oh dear.
My assistants had locked all the doors when they left for the evening, and through the silence of my study I could not have missed the sound of them opening again. To my dying day, Jonah, I will aver that no one entered the building before I heard the footsteps approach. As their heavy tread grew closer and the clack of the cane struck louder, with a quiet malice, I heard another sound beneath them. The jangle of keys. I have never in all of my life been possessed by such a fear as I was then. The walls and floor seemed to rise towards me, stealing the air from my lungs until I swear that I could feel the splinters from the ceiling digging into the soft skin of my face. I couldn't move as the thudding boot tread came to a halt outside the door, and the cane came to rest with a final whack.
Jonathan's getting really into this.
I waited to have the last vestiges of life squeezed from me by whatever this was. I don't know how much time passed, and then, as though suddenly sloughing off a heavy cloak, the weight fell from me. The room returned to its natural proportions, which is to say it never truly changed, I think. It is hard to describe exactly, Jonah, so you will forgive my vagaries. I rose to my feet, and in a moment of foolhardy bravery that I doubt I shall ever truly understand, I grabbed a candle and ran to the door, flinging it open. I saw a figure walking away through the door to one of the clerk's offices. It was short and wide, and I could see the wood of the floor bow beneath its huge boots. It wore a tall black hat, and only the thinnest wisps of grey hair were visible below. In its coarse, ruddy hand it held a hard-worn black cane tipped with iron. Then the door closed behind him and it was gone. I followed into the room behind it, but it was empty. There was no sign of the man or whatever it was that had gone in before me. The window was sealed, and there was nowhere for someone of that size to hide. Still I searched. I wasn't sure what else to do. Even the heavy boot prints seemed to have vanished. What I did manage to find, however, fallen behind one of the writing desks, was one of George Gilbert Scott's workhouse designs. There is, of course, no way to be certain of any connection between the two events, but that did little to quell the scalding rage in my breast as I strode out of my door the next morning. I took a cab to George's office, where I was informed that he was at his workhouse site with Moffat, and took another cab. I found the site in a state of some commotion, with my former assistant standing next to a high stone wall, arguing with a labourer who seemed quite distraught. He was gesturing wildly at an area of the wall, while another man, who I assumed to be Moffat, tried to calm him down. As I approached, I began to make out what the labourer was saying. He was asking after someone he referred to as the governor, while Moffat was trying very patiently to explain that no governor had yet been appointed to the workhouse. The labourer didn't seem to be paying this point much mind, however. He kept repeating that the governor had come to see Harry. He did not say who Harry was, but I assume an acquaintance of his. He said he knew it was the governor because of the jangle of his keys. He said that the governor had called Harry idle. It was at this point I was finally close enough to see the wall he was pointing at with such excitement. At first I thought they were worms, small and pale against the brickwork, but as I got closer I saw them clearly. Extending from the unblemished, solid stone of the workhouse wall were 4 fingertips. The labourer repeated it again. The governor had called Harry idle. I returned to George's documents and left. I trust you will understand now, Jonah, why I have been avoiding the company of my fellows these last few years. I have always been reluctant to make any notation of my story. But now that I finally have everything prepared for my move to New Zealand, I would feel like I had slighted you, and I left without sharing my tale. Do with it as you will. I am done with it.
Fuck off.
Sincerely yours, Samson Kempthorne. End statement. Obviously, trying to trace disappearances and deaths in Victorian workhouses is an exercise in futility, so I'm loath to even try. More importantly, who is Robert Smirk? I've read every book I can find on the man, which is admittedly not many, and none of them show any sign of this other side to him, apparently at the heart of strange buildings and architecture all over London. And now what? Students? Apprentices? If Henry Roberts was a student of some sort of paranormal construction methods, it doesn't appear to show up in any of his buildings, save perhaps for Fishmongers' Hall, which he designed along with Sir George Gilbert Scott for the Worshipful Company of Fishmongers in 1834. It is reportedly a hotbed for low-key hauntings, but nothing of the magnitude we've heard from others. Scott is concerning, however. While Smirk seems to have built a handful of notable buildings around London, Sir George Gilbert Scott is responsible for landmarks such as St Pancras Station, the Albert Memorial, and the restoration of Westminster Abbey. If his buildings have similar quirks, then, well, to be honest, I don't know what that would mean, but I doubt it will be good. That said, there have been no reports of any sort of paranormal or supernatural disturbance in any still-standing building designed by Scott. That should make me feel better, but somehow it doesn't.
Sean's not doing too good.
I'm sorry?
Are you in trouble?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, there was a policewoman asking after you. You know, the one who came to look into Gertrude.
Basira. When was this?
Yesterday. You were at physical therapy.
Did she say why?
No. It was a bit weird, really. I've seen her around here a few times before, actually. I don't trust her.
Sorry, what?
Well, I asked if she had anything new to report on Gertrude, and she just said no, and then mumbled a question about when you'd be back. Then she left. It was weird. She's weird.
You don't have a problem with the police, do you, Tim?
Well, you do know I'm the finest cat burglar in all of Bromley.
Tim.
Okay, so seriously, I don't get why she keeps coming back round here outside of the investigation.
She's, I'm helping her with some of the investigation. Off the record.
Oh. Say no more.
What do you know?
Don't worry. I'm cool. Boss.
Oh, no, Tim, that's...
I'll go see
not what
if I can dig anything else out on Scott,
really
and I'll let you know if she comes back.
That really isn't what...
Oh, Tim, you've only gone and done it again. You brilliant fucking idiotic man. Don't worry, I'm cool. Good work, boss. Oh no, Tim, I'll go see this. I like that the idea of doing something with what's her name? So like that John wasn't even willing to be like, yes, that's the reason. Yep. Because he was like, absolutely the fuck not. No. He's only got love for my boy Martin. I know that's not true, but I want it to be true. I'm so glad that the internet also agrees with me that they should be together. I've said this so many times, and I said this like so many episodes ago. I was like, yeah, Martin and John, the fucking match, you know? Why is that light so vibrant? So, also for some reason, my septum really hurts right now. I don't know if it's like because I put a new piercing in or if there's just something wrong with the hole. It's just hurty, and it's annoying because it shouldn't be hurty. But it's a very distinct kind of pain. It's not like it's not like a getting cut kind of pain. It's like well, it's like someone sticking something through your nose kind of pain, I guess. I don't fucking know. I don't know how to describe it. And to be honest, I don't need to. It is 1 a.m. I need to shower and then go to sleep. And because my friend is supposed to be coming around tomorrow to do work. So, yeah. I should probably go to sleep after I have a shower. Because I'm a stinky boy. Stinky boy needs stinky removal from the shower. Not gonna lie, those 3 episodes were really unfulfilling. I know I'm being so, but I was really hoping for like some, like some real juicy shit. I mean, we had a little bit with the supplementals, but after the whole Michael thing, a little bit of a letdown. Why aren't you still talking about Michael? I'm sorry, but that's such a weird experience. Why are you not more caught up on the Sasha thing? If I were John right now, I would have listened back to that audio hundreds of times. I would have written down every single word verbatim, and I would have analyzed like it was a fucking English GCSE, okay? There would not be a single potential meaning that would get past me. And I would certainly notice his use of the pronoun it when referring to Sasha. I know I have the pronoun it in my bio, but that's just because honestly, I quite like it. I'll explain that one. So when I first changed my pronouns to they, them, one of my friends had a real big issue with, not like she didn't like it, as in she really struggled to actually use my pronouns. And I was like, why? And somehow she ended up referring to me as it, and I really liked it. It was really nice. I couldn't stop smiling. I was like, I really like that. I know I probably shouldn't, but I really liked it. It felt so nice. I can't explain it. Like, I genuinely cannot explain it because it's such a weird thing to like, but genuinely it was like a really warm feeling. I was like, I really like, yeah, you can call me it. And since then I have been they it. Do not feel like you have to refer to me as it. You are under no obligation. But honestly, I keep it around because I was so shocked by how much I liked it that I was like, honestly, I think it deserves a little bit of credit because I was giddy. No one should be giddy at being called it. And yet, there I sat on the floor because where else would I fucking be? Giddy as a little shit. Being like, because you referred to me as it. So yeah, they it, and those are my pronouns now. And I quite like them. They do me good, I guess. Okay, so we had another because we got Gerard. We got Jared with a G, and we got Jared with a J. So we've got too many Jareds going on. Why are there so many fucking Jareds? And why are they all spelt differently? Tim now thinks that he's fucking a policeman. John is not pleased with this outcome, despite the fact that he gives him the perfect alibi for any future acquisitions. All he has to do is deal with a nice every time he sees Tim. That's all he has to do. Honestly, perfect cover-up. But the idea of having sex is so abominable. Maybe it's just having sex with a woman. I don't know. I've seen a bunch of stuff saying he's asexual. I don't know, obviously, because it's not come up. I could see it, but I also could very much not see it. I don't know. I mean, I think he's more just the very shy type, but I wouldn't really assume he was asexual. I would assume he's gay, like very gay. I've never met a queerer man in my life, and it does not, I can't explain it, but it's there, okay? Especially with his comfort around women. Like he's so much more confident around women, which suggests to me that he sees absolutely zero attraction in them whatsoever. But then when it comes to men, he's a bit more like, so I'm like, but I keep seeing things saying that he's asexual, which is fair enough, I guess, if that's the case. Or if people are just headcanoning it, that's also cool. My pills have worn off, by the way, if you need an explanation for why this is such a strange, deranged, and estranged conversation. Because my meds have fully out of the system, and I am. I wonder how long I can put off having a shower. I'm not even trying to put it off. It's just the thought of moving. I don't want to do it. I actually really want to shower because I'm sweaty, but I just don't move. It's not even because I'm full. I just don't move. I've been trying to find fan fictions which don't spoil things, and I've become very good at assuming everything is fake, because that's the only way I get around the subtle things. Like they'll bring up names and I'll go, it must be an OC, and I move on real quick. I'll hear names and I'll go, it must be an OC. Or it'll be like, I know he doesn't get the da-da-da, and I'm like, cool headcanon. I am trying so hard to avoid spoilers, but honestly, the thing with looking up Elias's name, that has pissed me off. I'm furious about it. And I'm trying so hard to forget, but it's so hard to forget. And the thing is it makes me so angry, and every time I think of Elias, it goes bing, straight to the front of my mind, and it's infuriating, and I want it to go away. I want my memories to be erased. This is bullshit. this isn't fair. Why is it that I still remember something I looked at for like half a second, but I don't remember anything about stats? That's bullshit, okay? Fucking bollocks. Anyway, yeah, so, but I'm still not going to say what I saw, because the minute I say it, it materializes in the world. And if I can avoid that, excuse me, if I can avoid that, we're in a good spot. Maybe I will fucking forget it. I sincerely doubt that I will, but you know, one can hope and dream and pray. Little scabs on my lips really hurt. Don't know why I forced those fucking things on. I don't know if you can see them either. Can you? Yeah, you can see them a little bit. You see those little dots? Yeah, it's where I forced like these rings onto my lips and they dug into my skin. Because I'm a fucking idiot who really wants snake bites. Okay, I guess I ought to go shower. And hopefully I will see you tomorrow. So, goodbye.